let's face it, transitions are inevitable, and both Barbara and I are in the middle of this, just like all of you. So the objective of today's program is really, through storytelling, we want to inspire and offer insights to women in transition or approaching transition to encourage them to really prioritize themselves and to develop a process where they can explore things like their identity, values, their belief system, who they want to be in the future, what brings them joy, and most importantly, how they want to feel. Our intention is to mitigate fears or inertia, perhaps, and empower you to take action today, to really appreciate the journey that you're going to go through, the journey today as well as beyond. And as I said, hopefully you all adopt a best is yet to come mindset. With that, all transitions also require you to explore and review your finances as well.
Yeah, that's so true, Nancy. And of course we make multiple transitions at different phases of our life, but knowing your financial ability to support a transition is really essential so that you can successfully go through it and sustain it in the future. And I think it really breaks down to two components. First is budgeting, knowing your numbers, like what does it cost to be you today? Mm-hmm. And then what does this potential transition look like, and what's the impact it might have on your future finances? And the way of really doing that comprehensively is through a financial plan and the financial planning process. That really has you take a look at your assets and liabilities that you've accumulated. What are you projecting to bring in the future? And then is there an intersection between those financial resources and your crazy wild dreams, so that you can sustain that vision of your future self? Right. And then maybe there's different scenarios you want to model out, or if there's a gap, how do you fill that gap? What does that mean, that financial gap of supporting what you want to be? Does that mean saving more, cutting expenses now, working longer, all different ways of doing that projection? Because at the end of the day, what matters is that you can really make the most of this one incredible life that we have. And the financial planning process, I think the two key things that Nancy and I talk a lot about and our clients appreciate is it creates greater peace of mind and confidence that allows you to move forward in your life. So speaking of moving forward, let's move forward into the program and hear from our incredible panelists. So we're really grateful today to have Ivy Slater, Angie Sebastian, and Mary Wallace Yench with us. And we're going to have them introduce themselves and take us on a bit of their journey of successful transformation. So Angie, why don't you kick it off for us?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's morning where I am still. I am in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I am in transition. This is part of my transition dream. I'm working remotely from this location for 3 months, which is far better than my typical home in Chicago where it's snowing today. So where do I start? I want to start by sharing my story. There's no shoulding. You should do this. I want you to do this. Here's the template. It's a very personal journey I've found, and I'm happy to share mine. And perhaps you may hear something or be inspired by something that could move something for you. So I had a very successful career as a high-level executive. I started out in the financial realm, and I ended up as the chief executive officer of a law firm in Chicago. There's a siren, sorry. Levenfeld Pearlstein. I spent 30 years in the legal industry. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm a bit of an anomaly. I'm used to a challenge. One of my habits that contributed to my success as an executive is planning. And I was constantly planning and not only planning for the business, but planning for myself. And so I developed this habit of going on personal retreats with myself for a day or two, a couple times a year. and really mapping out, where is the business going? Where are the challenges? What's coming ahead of us, and trying to be always ahead of the challenges that were coming. And while I did that, I would integrate that into my own life. Okay, how old will my kids be? How old will I be? How much money will I have in my investments and my retirement savings? And just, it wound up being this spreadsheet. I'm a CPA, so it's not everyone has to do a personal planning exercise in the form of a spreadsheet, but it works for me, right? And so I started to notice, well, where we were going with the business is not building anymore, it's just maintaining. Like, I started in the firm in its founding years, so it was very exciting and challenging to build a company, build an organization. But then 2 decades in, it's like, oh, that system we put in place needs to be replaced now. We've outgrown it, or we need to move, or we need to, there's going to be another succession plan at the lawyer level. And I'm like, ooh, I don't want to do that again. I've already done that. And according to my spreadsheet, I was also approaching empty nester stage. My kids I have 3, they're in their 20s. And I said, maybe a change is in order. And so I decided to make a change, and I put in place a 5-year succession plan. I was part of the founding team. And so it was quite shocking when I told them at the age of 50 that I wanted to be done by the time I'm 55. And my last day was the day before my 55th birthday. And so what helped me along the way, in addition to preparing the organization, is preparing myself and taking a lot of time for myself. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do next, but I know myself. I've spent a lot of time working on myself. I know I can make the best out of every situation. I know I didn't have the energy anymore for doing what needed to be done at the organization. And I explored coaching as a possible next level for me. And in the training process of becoming an organizational and leadership coach, I benefited greatly from having really a team of coaches now as peers who support me, and I couldn't have done it without them. And I'm being conscious of my 5-minute limit. So I want to share one other thing that really, really was useful for me, and that is changing my input, changing what I allowed in, what I was reading, who I was spending time with. And ultimately that led me to another tool that was, I would say, transformational in my life, and that is the Enneagram. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I became so enthralled with it, and it impacted me so deeply that I'm now a trained practitioner of it. And so now I bring that into my work, and I help other leaders of organizations be their best self, whether it's in their organization or moving out of their organization, whatever it is. And I get to do what I love every day. And I got to get rid of the stuff that I honestly didn't love to do anymore. There was a lot of it. And at this point in my life, being where I am here in Mexico and enjoying exploring new discoveries, it's just a great place to be. So that's my story. Thank you for listening.
Ivy, how about yourself?
Well, Angie, I am completely envious of you. And it actually is not about Puerto Vallarta right now. I think a lot of you got our bios. And so if I give you why I'm envious of Angie, is she had a plan. My transition came a little like a freight train coming right at me. And I am an anal planner. I mean, it's part of what I do for organizations and businesses, et cetera, today, that it's just my nature. And I say, it's nothing I ever studied. It comes through my heritage. all the women in my line, from my mother to my grandmother to my sister to my daughter, my niece, were all really anal planners. And at, complete disclosure, at 45, my birthday is in April. And in April of 07, I just woke up and I started crying. And I was just, it felt like a freight train was literally coming at me with the headlights coming right at me. I said, what am I going to do? My kids are in their teens at this point. They're going to be out of the house in a blink of an eye. And before opening Slater Success, my company today, I was in the printing industry. I had my own printing company. We were very successful in New York City. I made a great living. But to be honest, I had dreams as a young woman. I had dreams of being a dancer. I blew out my knee at 23. I had dreams of being a producer. I got fired from my first job. All those dreams sent me on a different path. And it ended up that I was in the printing industry. And it wasn't that I had regrets about what I did and what I was doing, but I was like, who am I going to be when these kids leave the house? And I look in the mirror and I say, who am I? I was like, I'm a printer. Oh my God, like that's embarrassing. What happened to the young woman with all the hopes and dreams? So the freight train was April of my 45th birthday month. And I was like, who am I going to be and what am I going to do? And I was truly working out with a friend and we were doing walking lunges and I was crying again. I was Noah's Ark. I cried for 30 days. If I went into Starbucks and I ordered, a latte in the morning, by the time the tay came out, I was weeping. And if this resonates with anyone, it was incredibly uncomfortable. It's not who I am. I'm a leader of a business. I'm a doer, a go-getter, and I was falling apart at the seams. And on this lark, this friend of mine looked at me and she goes, you ought to become a coach. And my response was, soccer? This was 07. I had no clue. And I said, I can't dance anymore. I can't do a full plie. I have no idea what you're referring to. I went home, hit Google, and, page 1 in 07, there was no coaching. There was no coaching in page 2. There was no page 3, maybe at the bottom, and it said soccer. I was like, you see, that's what she's talking about, So I didn't get it. But I am a market research person, from being in the printing industry. I believe in doing your market research, understanding what's going on. And I started speaking to everyone. And I learned about this field. And I'm a decision maker and I threw myself into it. I signed up for a program by June 1, got a stack of books to read over the summer, to get myself. And I tell my kids, mom's going back to school. They're like, what? You're not going to have your business anymore. I said, no, I'm going to have my business, but I'm going to go to school. And at night, I'll be at the kitchen table with you. We could do our work together. Jump forward. I eventually created this vision. I created a plan. I got, the freight train. I got into that engineer seat and I started driving the train, created a several-year exit strategy of my printing company, had all of that in place, created a plan to open this company. I opened Slater Success in January of 08. If anybody wants to guess what's going on in the market in 08, it was not the optimal time to open a business. But I had a plan. My husband was bought in on the plan. We had we raised our kids in New York City. It's a high overhead lifestyle with 2 homes. Plan was going great until March. His business came to a close. There went the whole backup plan. And I said, I can get a job. I can get a job. I could sell printing. People want me. I've always been wanted. I can peddle. And he looked at me and he goes, do you believe you could make a living at this? Do you believe this is a real business? And I said, I really do. I know I can do this. And he said, then do it. So when the whole idea started back in 07, I was like, okay, I'll get some clients. I'll figure this out. I'm smart. I got this. Well, there was no getting it. It was like, we got to make money. We got to make money yesterday. And it was scary. It was very, very scary. And I felt like that freight train was coming and barreling down on me again. The one thing I felt very much for a woman who likes to have all of her ducks lined up in size order, making sure everything's color coordinated. You know, my ducks were not in a row. It was scrambling. It was learning. It was figuring things out. It was taking, you know, I ran my printing company. I ran Slater Graphics as I was running Slater Success, 2 kids, 2 homes, 1 husband, and 1 headache. That was truly going on. I'd say it was probably, when I look back, one of the most challenging times of my life. Yet it also proved to me that if I can do anything, I could rise to any occasion. It wasn't fun at the time. I'm not gonna, you know, paint beautiful pictures, because it was the time that financially we were in a really bad place. You know, I will say the transition, being on the other side of it, was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I am doing today what I am meant to do. And, you know, as I'll close this, for me, is in that market research, I sat down with somebody and I said, you know, I'm thinking about this thing called coaching. And she just looked at me with open eyes. She goes, that's you. I said, what does that mean? She goes, go for it. Figure it out. I've known you a long time. It is you. And I will say today, I'm a proud owner of Slater Success, which is a coaching, consulting, and training company with clients all over this country and a bunch of clients internationally. And I've never been happier at what I do.
Fantastic. Ivy, thank you very much for sharing that. Mary, how about you close us up here?
So my gratitude for all of you being here and willing to listen to our stories. They're all very distinct stories, and I hope you'll recognize that this is a very personal journey. The good news is as distinct and personal as they are, there often are common tips and hacks of how to move through these. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of those as well. So my story is that I've made 3 career transitions in my life. The first 2 were actually, in hindsight, pretty easy, because while they were slight redirections, they built very naturally on what I had done previously. So I went from a corporate job to running my own consulting business to being a venture-backed CEO in a similar kind of market. It was after that last sort of career shift that I faced the most difficult transition, which is now about 10 years ago, because I was faced with being a lot clearer about what I did not want to do than I was clear about what I did want to do. And being a woman of my generation, trained to think analytically, I kept asking myself, how can I put a plan in place to figure out where to go if I don't know where I'm going? Which was paralyzing, really paralyzing. And so what's interesting to me is that sometimes it's sort of, Ivy got the push at 45, Angie got the push at 50. All of us at moments in our lives get very clear that what we're doing is not where we want to be for whatever reason. And the challenge is, how do we then figure out what the next step is? I wasn't nearly as analytical as Ivy and Angie, so I'll just put that on the table. I really struggled to figure out, how do I put a process in place to move through this transition if I'm not quite sure where the destination is? And what was fortunate for me was, from some former clients, I was introduced to something called design thinking, which is an innovation process that actually inherently assumes that you're going to make a left or right turn and you can't see where you're going, but it gives you steps to be sure that when you ultimately get there, wherever that is, that there's a much higher probability that you're going to feel happy, fulfilled, and purposeful. And so I applied it to myself and then started working with other women. And I don't even call them transitions anymore. I mean, the only certain thing about life is change. We are talking about navigating change consciously and with agency so that you can do it with a little more confidence. And so my business now that's evolved in the last 5 or 6 years is actually providing some of the tools and tips and skills and experiences to help women navigate these kinds of career changes, which inherently are always about life changes too, with more confidence that even if it's not clear, that they will ultimately, like Angie and Ivy, they will get to a place that is delivering a sense of purposefulness and meaning that makes them happy. And ultimately that's, you know, it is about figuring out who you want to be when you grow up, not necessarily just what you want to do. So I'm going to stop there so we can get to the questions, but I want to encourage anyone who feels they're being stopped because they aren't sure where they want to go. There are ways to get there.
That's so powerful, Mary. And I think about the idea of just taking an action, just move forward type of thing. So I'm going to ask the first question. So I'm curious about, as you were in this messy middle, the bitch of the hallway that we call it, perhaps, what were some of your biggest challenges and how did you overcome them? Some of you referenced them during your intro, but maybe you can highlight 1 or 2 more.
We'll go start with maybe Ivy. You want to kick us off?
Sure. You know, Mary said the word confidence. I think when we go to transition, one of the things we're doing is we're stepping into something new. And I remember hearing, at least whether it was said or not, but this is what I heard, you're new at this, so you have to charge less. So here I was building this company, Slater Success, after making, you know, kind of this transition out of Slater Graphics. And I was like, well, I can't charge much. I'm new at this. And then I said, well, how do I charge? I know if I delivered brochures to a client, which let's say call it W Magazine, Harper's Bazaar, New York Magazine, for you and my clients, it was X amount of skids, pallets, shrink wrapped, a delivery charge. It was very clear. There was a methodology on how to price. Well, there was no methodology here. And I was like, do I put myself on a skid and shrink wrap it? And what's my delivery fee? Where do these numbers come from? How do I figure out how to charge for a result that I truly don't understand? And then that lack of confidence was, well, I can't charge much because I'm new at this. So I have to be humble and I have to learn and I have to pay my dues. But, you know, I was 45 plus years old by this point, and I had paid some dues in my life. And it took me that transition. And, you know, thank goodness I am a person who builds lifetime relationships. And I truly believe in the value of building relationships. So I told every person I ever met, including all my printing clients, that I was opening up a second company. And they, you know, you give it time and you keep talking about things and sharing things. And I would share what I was learning. And they would be like, all of a sudden, somebody would call me up and say, hey, I'm thinking of opening this marketing agency. Hey, can I tap your brain and ask you a few questions? So it happened like 1, 2, maybe a dozen times until the confidence kicked in and said, I could charge for this. This is something I know. And this isn't something that is under what they taught me in coaching school of how to charge this way. This is something else. How could I look at it differently? And it was that of stepping in and being paid my worth, which was one of the most uncomfortable things I ever did, because I could easily price out a brochure, but pricing out the results on the deliverables and seeing it differently was the scariest, most uncomfortable thing I ever did.
Yeah, Ivy, thank you for sharing that. You know, I think pricing your worth and owning your worth is a challenge at times, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And, you know, I want to have Mary come next. And I know we had a really good question. If you and Angie is likely going to speak to this in your comments, building your support structure when you went through this to help you navigate that would be great.
So what's interesting to me, what I learned myself and what I support my clients in, is by definition, change forces you to try new things. And the challenge we have as successful, effective women is it's been a little while since we had to remember how to be a child who can't do it exactly right the first time. It's about being uncomfortable, okay? And most of us assume that if we feel uncomfortable, we're doing something wrong. When in fact, feeling uncomfortable is a signal that we're experimenting, that we're learning. It's a good signal, even though it's uncomfortable. And I think that that's like a major mind shift. And that ties into the question about structure. It's always easier if you have some companions, whether that's people you can talk to, whether it's a coach. I found a wonderful woman completely by chance, courtesy of Ivy, actually. She doesn't know, I mean, she knows the story, but she didn't intentionally do this. But she did introduce me to a whole new world that I didn't know anything about. But this coach would just ask me these such pain in the ass questions. And I finally got to a place where we'd been working together for a while, and she'd ask me something, oh my God, it's another, forgive my French, fucking growth opportunity. When are we going to be done? Like when don't I have to feel so uncomfortable? And really, it took me a long time, and I try to help my clients realize that it's actually a very powerful place to be.
Yeah.
And if we can approach it as powerfully, then we get the opportunity to use that moment more effectively and more confidently. And I believe personally that this is a very difficult thing to do by yourself. I really think we see ourselves more clearly and we see possibilities more easily when we have mirrors, when we have, whether they're friends or family or professionals, helping reflect back what they're hearing and seeing. So to the structure, I think it's critical that you find some way to surround yourself with people who will help you see new possibilities more easily.
And yeah, Mary, Angie, you spoke a little bit about that in your introduction about, kind of doing an audit on who was around you and who would support you. Maybe you can speak to that and perhaps some of your challenges.
Then Angie, also, I'd love for you to speak to another question here is, it's about this person doesn't want to necessarily take another role or transition. They're trying to simplify. And when I think about your change, you managed this entire business and made a very significant shift. So issues of identity and impact must have been something that you had to go through as well in that transition.
Well, and I'm still going through it. So let me just clarify, I am in transition right now. My emotional wheelhouse is all over the place. I am not on the other side of it. I am in it. It's very early in the transition. And, some days I wake up and I'm like, I'm so excited. I get to go to the beach today. Look at me. And other days I'm like, what the hell have you done? I've been an employee my whole life, and where's your paycheck? And, it's just this constant barrage of voices saying, what have you done? Are you crazy? You had, you were comfortable, you were this, you were that. And then the other side is saying, there's more to life than just working. There's more to life than just doing. And for me, the concept of enough has been central to my journey, like really questioning, how much do I need to work? How much do I need to have? Where is my enough point? And really getting clear on that. And I do have enough. Not only do I have enough internally to find my space and find my way, I have enough financial resources to be able to take a leap like this. Like I downsize a lot of my commitments. I have zero debt. I have enough savings and short-term savings to float for a whole year if I need to, right? So the financial planning was critical for me. And even now, when I wake up in the middle of the night and say, what are we going to do for money? I look at my spreadsheet. I know it sounds weird, but my spreadsheets bring me a lot of calmness because I've addressed this fear already that says, if you can't make it on your own, and by the way, I don't know exactly what that looks like. I'm still experimenting with different things. Most of it has to do with leadership coaching and strategic advising, but even among that, like, do I want to still work with legal? Do I want to only work with this demographic? Am I only going to do this? You know, figuring it out, because my business mind knows that the more you narrow your offering, the greater chance you'll have of success in business anyway. But just kind of navigating all of this, coaching, again, has helped me tremendously. And I just listened to a podcast yesterday. I don't know if you listen, again, remember my inputs, I changed them. I still read the Wall Street Journal every day. And but there's some other financial journals that I've let, you know, my frequency diminish. And now I listen to other things. And so I was listening to a podcast by Dan Harris called 10% Happier. And he was interviewing someone this week, the person who wrote The Good Life, which is a sequel to the longest longitudinal study in the world on happiness. And one of the things, I mean, there's many takeaways from that, but one of the things he said yesterday in the podcast that really resonated with me, and I'll share it with you today because it's kind of, I think, relevant, is never worry alone. And basically the bottom line of the whole study and all of this effort is we need social connection. We need social connection. And in my case, being the CEO, a woman in a male-dominated field, not being a lawyer, like how much lonelier could I create a situation for myself, right? I had no peers, really, and really just hearing my other colleagues sharing how lonely they were because all they did was work their whole life, and I'll tell you from networking, and we all know the value of networking, but intergenerational networking was key for me. Like getting energy from people who were younger from me and appreciating that perspective, also relying on them to tell me when I was completely out of touch and I was showing it because my own generation. But then befriending people in a higher generation than me to really appreciate their perspective from that angle was so helpful. And I would encourage all of you to make sure that your network includes different generations. I think it's so valuable. So I tried to hit on the points that I was asked to do. I hope I did. I don't know.
Yeah, I think those were really resonating. And you know what really has, if I look at the three of you, it's your ability to be vulnerable. You know, when you're a CEO or a leader or running a business, it's, you know, you've got that veneer, you want to show up, or even, you know, when you're a mom, just not, we tend not to be vulnerable. And sometimes when we lean into that and are willing for that, so many possibilities and rich conversations can open as well. So I think that's probably an important part of this transition too. Which really leads me to the final question before the Q&A that we'd love for you guys to address is what are, you know, just a nugget of what is an essential for a successful transition, maybe something you haven't mentioned yet, because I know you've already infused a little bit. I don't know, Mary, if there's anything else you wanted to add about.
I think one of the biggest opportunities for making this change, and you've noticed that Ivy and Angie, and it's not that they let go of necessarily former metrics of success, but they've started to add new metrics, right? That have to do with their own affirmation of what is good and valuable in their life versus just relying on external definitions of success. They've started to look at life integrated with work in new ways. And I think part of the challenge, the mind shift as you move through this, is to at least pull up and ask, what will make me feel fulfilled and satisfied and happy at this moment in my life, which is not to denigrate how you got here. How you got here is going to give you all the tools to create the new possibilities. But the opportunity is to rethink how you're going to assess success, right? For Angie, figuring out what enough was started to shift how she's going to evaluate her progress forward. For me, it was, I shifted from, I was somebody who'd always brought the fish, always offered the solutions. And I realized I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to teach people how to fish, right? So my success metrics, how I was evaluating how well I was doing, helped me shift the direction as effectively as anything else. So I just put that on the table because sometimes we try to go into new things with old metrics and it makes it harder than it needs to be.
Especially when you start shifting to purpose-driven attributes, I think metrics are completely different. That's a really great point. Ivy, how about you?
One of the things I start every call with any and every client, it doesn't matter how big or small the company, of share at least one success. And as I was reading the chat, somebody had written about the inner dialogue. And I think, calling a spade as women, we beat ourselves up so much. We are so self-critical. And we put an enormous amount of self-pressure on ourselves because of it. So, two things I'll always suggest: keep a success journal. Look at yourself as others see you. Acknowledge what has worked. And it could be, baby steps add up. So if I say, you know what, I did a panel today. And now my clients, the funny thing is my clients turn it on me. They're like, okay, so Ivy, what was yours? And I'm like, well, I did a panel today with all these wonderful women, and bring together a tribe of support. Truly know who your support system is. Know where you could reach out. Who sees the best of you when we don't always see the best of ourselves? Because, we stand in the mirror and say, I don't know, do you think my back is my behind is showing too much in this? And does this, is it too low? Is it too high? I'm not sure. Is their hair sticking out? Are they gray? Like we look in the mirror and we take ourselves apart, ladies. Bring yourself a tribe, bring together a tribe for yourself that says, you look hot today. And no matter what it is, you did great today. And start acknowledging every day your own successes. Find at least one every day. And it's what I've done for myself. And it was damn uncomfortable, let me tell you.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I'm just going to add that I would offer that it's always best to start something like that in the morning. I mean, it's whether you call it a ritual, a routine, or whatever it is, and whether it's made up of listening to a podcast or affirmations or sitting in silence or meditating. If you do it in the morning, it really anchors you. Whatever it is that speaks to you, make it a system, make it a process and part of your journey. Angie, how about you?
Yeah, positive self-talk is definitely a practice that I offer to many of my clients, and it's quite useful. Being kind includes being kind to ourselves, right? I would say in my case, in terms of what were the essentials to my transition, two things come to mind. One is financial preparedness. And I don't know if that's just me. I grew up with a lot of financial insecurity, and I have a lot of like hangover challenges around finances. Maybe that's why I chose the career path I did. Who knows? This is not a group psychiatry session. But the other big thing for me was creating some space, like space to just be and think and process. And I was so overscheduled, so in demand, never having any time to breathe, never having enough time to complete something to the best of my ability, but just prioritizing. And that was my job, right? It was also my life. And so since I was the CEO, I created a sabbatical policy, and I took one. And it was only 6 weeks, but it was enough to give me a taste of, oh, I like this. Like, now I can breathe. Now I'm not wedging in a 1 week vacation with, piling up the work before and after and not really getting a break. That was the first time I was able to breathe. And I travel. That, to me, that feeds my soul. It exposes me to other perspectives than just the American or Western perspective, which is highly oriented towards what we do and being obsessed with productivity. It was helpful for me, and I was fortunate enough to be in a situation to do that. So creating space and financial preparedness, including the scaling back of my commitments. I also had 2 homes. And the second one was in New Buffalo, if you're familiar with the Midwest. And, I had this place where I felt like I could go to escape. And I had this conversation with myself on one of my retreats. And I realized I want to create a life that I don't have to escape from. I don't want to escape from my life. I don't need this extra house for the purpose of escaping if I create a life that I really just enjoy every single day. And that's kind of my goal. I wish I could tell you I'm crystal clear on my purpose. What I can tell you is that I'm working it out. And it's getting more clear.
And I think the message is all of you will, everyone on this call will work it out as well. It's interesting, Angie, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I sold my home in Chicago and simplified everything in my life and live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath little home here in Florida. No storage units. Everything I own is in this house. And the freedom that gives you and the sense of enough. I don't need 4 sets of dishes. I don't, all that kind of stuff is when you simplify your life and you get to a mindset of less is more. I think you become, for me, I became a lot more grounded. So what you said definitely speaks to me. So we want to be mindful of everybody's time and give all of our guests an opportunity to ask some questions. Some have already been asked, which is great. But if anybody would like to come off mute and ask our panelists any questions, please feel free to.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. So I am a lawyer by background. I also have served my local community. But I am really interested in something that's much more human as my career. My volunteer work on my village board is separate from that. And I've always thought about coaching as part of like a human resources consulting coaching practice. But with my legal background, I'm so credentialed and it's so regulatory. I just don't get like, what's the credential of coaching? And is the coaching school really teach you something psychological, or is it more about like, hey, you could do this too? Or I just don't, I always wonder like, what is coaching school? And if I did do this, is it just because I'm naturally inquisitive and like listening and helping that would make me succeed? Or do I need some kind of credential? Like, what would I be getting out of that?
Ivy, why don't you go first? And then Angie, I'm the only one who is not a credentialed coach, although I have a coaching business. So I'm going to let them talk first and then I'll answer.
So there's a lot of great programs out there. Some are more than you need. Some are not, I'll just say there's a lot of great programs out there. I'm happy to talk about my experience with where I went through IPEC coach training. I thought they were fabulous. It was at that time, it was a 9-month program that I extended for an additional certification for 12. The ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation, is doing more with having credentials in the industry, in this industry. So if you're working with large companies, they might look for accreditations. If I'm working today with small business, they don't really care. So there's still this openness depending upon who you're working with and who your clients are, whether you want to be accredited or not. As you heard Angie and Mary, they have done certifications with different assessments. I have a certification in an assessment. I think that can be a great asset. I will also say it could be a detriment as we say, oh, let me get one certified in one more assessment. Well, once I have this assessment, I'll be ready to go. Assessments are tools, and they're great in the work of coaching if it's within the area or niche market that you're looking for. I don't know if I gave as much of an answer as you were looking for, so tell me.
Yeah, I guess I kind of know about that certification and that interest of having some kind of an industry. I always am curious, like if you want to be a social worker, you can read what the classes are. You just can't seem to ever read, like, what am I going to be learning in that? Because they're expensive. Those programs can be expensive.
They are not inexpensive. I will say I showed up at day one and saying, what in the world do I belong here? And what in the world am I going to learn? And what is this about? I found the training, and Angie, maybe you could speak on it. I found the training invaluable. And I also found the community I was put into invaluable.
Yeah, I would agree. I received my coaching training at Georgetown University. It's a 10-month program. It was very experiential as well as academic learning. Coaching is a construct. It is a process. You can learn it. You need to practice it. It was transformational for me personally, and I learned the skill of how to be a more observant listener and holding space for someone else, which is like the tools of coaching, which is listening differently. And it is a technique, and there is a construct. And it's very individually tailored to the person in front of you. It's not like, here's the construct, go apply it to every single person. It's like, no, here are all the different ways this could go. And every conversation is different because you as the coach are going to show up how you are today with whatever you're carrying. Your client is going to show up with whatever is coming up for them. And so in the power of inquiry, like the conversation could go anywhere depending on everything, right? So the skill of coaching is how to navigate that and still serve the client. And the whole point of it, and Mary talked about this, is creating awareness for growth. That is the point. More growth, right? More growth. And changing practices and habits and becoming aware of where we might be getting in our own way, right? And coaches don't tell you what to do. They support you through the process of you figuring out where you're going by asking questions. And so I would say, Simone, you mentioned you're a lawyer. I've found, again, I'm new at this, that you bring your background with you, right? And so lawyers like to work with people who understand them, who like to work with lawyers. And so as much as I'd love to get away from lawyers and law firms and experiment outside of that, boy, do those opportunities keep finding me, right? And so I'm astute enough to sit as a business person to say, okay, what do I do with this? How can I approach this in a way that works for me now? But lawyers, if you're planning to work in the legal industry at all, I definitely think credentialing is an absolute necessity. And I'd be happy to talk to you more about it offline if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would appreciate that.
The only thing I'd add is that to me, it's about learning to listen in different ways and to always start with questions. I was fortunate enough that the work I did was that. So as I started to think about coaching, and I did take a credentialing, it was a course in systems and design thinking, I realized that I actually had the skills to be able to shift from bringing the fish to teaching people how to fish, which is why I decided not to go to coaching school. But I think for anybody who hasn't been in the business of active listening, and most of us are not paid to be in the business of active listening, we are paid to be in the business of active doing. And we have the other thing that coaching does, and Angie and I did work with a coach personally to do this. You have to be really clear about who you are and the shit you carry so that it doesn't spill over to the clients. And that's a process. And you can do it with a therapist, you can do it in a coaching certification program, you can do it with a coach, but active listening, starting with questions, and really owning your own shit are probably the most critical things you have to do to be a good coach.
Thank you, Mary. I would also offer, if I may, that from a business perspective, coaching is becoming more of a recognized strength and value, and companies are starting to invest in it more. So from an opportunity perspective, if any of you are considering it, I don't think coaching, it's becoming less of a hard sell. Before it was like, ooh, what's coaching? That's, is that for people who are on their way out, the last ditch effort before we can fire them? No, that's absolutely not what it is. And I won't ever take clients like that. But it is becoming more recognized as something valuable. And I started as a business person first. And what I love about coaching is if you do any work in change execution, change management, you realize that the most difficult point of change is at the personal level, where this person will not move. And so coaching really addresses the gap of this brilliant strategy that you want to execute and this person who's really important who's not on board, right? And so how do we bridge that? How do we navigate that? And coaching is the tool that I've found as a business leader to be the answer. And so I think more and more businesses are discovering that and are willing to invest in it. And I think that coaching is a young profession. The ICF is less than 25 years old. So it's picking up traction. It's gaining credibility and deservedly, because it's that powerful. Okay.
It does seem like a great career for people who want to give back after they've done all of the doing, and you have so much wisdom to offer others. Is like being an actual lawyer and going to court and arguing. I like, no thanks,
Right.
Grind of it all, it's much more like my natural personality is generosity. And so I want to do something that's much more like along those lines and positive and not like fighting about anything, which I really don't want to do anymore. So something on the line. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and you hit on, again, one of our themes, Simone, about the wisdom. We all have so much wisdom, there's so much wisdom, so many that accomplished leaders have to share. So we have time for one more question, if anybody else wants to come off mic.
Nancy, this is Patty McNunny.
Hi, Patty.
Hi. First of all, want to say thank you to all the coaches and share a story that's not about me, but is about a friend of mine that just speaks to how the coaching industry has changed. And she's a physician who experienced addiction issues. And she then decided to become a coach and a recovery coach. And back to you, Simone, like, who were her clients? It was people who knew what she did and people in the helping and caring professions. But I think she got her license through ICF as all. in addition, because coaching is so much bigger than just about one issue, but I see more and more that coaching is becoming specialized, whereas before it was like life coaching, and now people are drilling down into particular different areas based on their experience and interest.
So, Patty, I want to jump in on that for a moment. A couple of weeks ago, I run a bunch of executive leaderships, offsites, meetings, things like that. And it's January, so there's a lot of strategy going on right now. So I walked into this room of 9 executives, and we worked with them before. And I walk in, and this gentleman opens his arms. He goes, "My life coach is here."
I love that.
And here we were brought in literally by the CEO and their PE company to work on the this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, call me whatever you like. You got it. And I opened my arms. I was like, your life coach is here, because that's what helps move him forward. Exactly. What Angie was saying, it is, there's so many areas and niches in coaching today,
right?
And have high value. I spoke at a conference, do not laugh. I spoke at a conference a bunch of years ago that was a sleep training coaching group. And they helped young parents with sleep training of their children. And they brought me in to speak on sales and looking at sales and coaching. And I shared my own obstacles with that early on. So it made sense. And I walked out of there and said, I wish I knew this when my kids were young. I would have paid anything to hire a coach in this.
Right.
So there's wonderful areas and for people to really delve into in this career zone.
Right.
I would like to take it broader for a minute than coaching.
Mm-hmm.
The reason coaching is interesting is because we can all use help making change. And what I'd hope everybody would walk away from in this is, if you're ready to make a change, there are people out there who can help you. And this is another mistake a lot of women make, including myself, which is we think we're supposed to be able to do it ourselves. And there is no diminishment to your wisdom, to your experience, to ask for help. And making change requires your ability to look at your identity and what you believe and what you value. And it is really, really helpful to have people to help you do that. So coaching's a great career, and I don't mean to diminish it, but for those of you who aren't thinking about coaching, it's the idea of asking for help to navigate this change with even greater confidence and agency. Change is chaos, it's uncertainty, it's insecurity, it's unsafe, and most of us go through it holding our noses. That's how I handled the first 4 or 5 years of change. There's a better way to do it. There's a confident way to do it. There's owning your own agency. I mean, the one thing you can see about Ivy and Angie is they made spreadsheets, like they did things to create agency in their own change. And we all have that ability. That's the one thing you share on this, is you are effective, successful women. You can bring agency to this experience.